was driving up to stop at our Richmond location and see the testing in action and thank the associates, whether it be security or pharmacy, front end, everybody who's helping with this great effort, and all of the customers that appreciate this so much. It was really amazing to see. And I want to thank my 50,000 associates also for keeping these retail locations up and running during these really, really tough times. It's been quite amazing. And we, too, are going to expand our testing, and we're doing about 1,500 a day. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So thank you all very much. It's incredible what we've done together over a short period of time. I want to thank our Vice President for the task force and the work. Every day it gets better, and we had a fantastic call with the governors today, and I would say that they are as thrilled as they can be, considering that the fact is that there has been so much unnecessary death in this country. It could have been stopped, and it could have been stopped short, but somebody a long time ago, it seems, decided not to do it that way. And the whole world is suffering because of it, 184 countries at least. But I want to thank all of these great business men and women for the job they've done. They've been fantastic with us, working with us. And as you know, for several weeks, my administration has encouraged the governors to leverage unused testing capacity in states. Very few understood that we have tremendous capacity. Then 1 week ago, we provided each governor with a list of names, addresses, and phone numbers of the labs where they could find additional testing capacity in their states. Within 48 hours, the number of tests performed across the country began to absolutely skyrocket. On Saturday alone, more than 200,000 test results were reported, which is a gigantic number, bigger than any country anywhere in the world.
Sure, you're smart, but do you have Bloomberg Intelligence?
From Beijing, Bloomberg Intelligence Chief Asia Economist Tom Orlin.
Insight into where crucial industries stand today and where they may be heading next.
Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Analyst Jonathan Tice.
Enhance your Wall Street acumen with Bloomberg Intelligence.
Sam Fazeli, Director of European Research at Bloomberg Intelligence.
Dan Hansen, great to have you on the programme.
Bloomberg Intelligence, only on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Radio Plus app, and Bloomberg.com.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision-makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
For a much longer period of time. A number that is an increase earlier in the month when we tested roughly less than 100,000 a day. So we much more than doubled it, and that will be doubling again very shortly. We are continuing to rapidly expand our capacity and confident that we have enough testing to begin reopening and the reopening process. We want to get our country open, and the testing is not going to be a problem at all. In fact, it's going to be one of the great assets that we have. Today, we're releasing additional guidance on testing to inform the states as they develop their plans for a phased and very safe reopening. Our blueprint describes how states should unlock their full capacity, expand the number of testing platforms, establish monitoring systems to detect local outbreaks, and conduct contact tracing. We have it all. Other countries are calling to find out what are we doing and how do you do it, and we're helping them. We're dealing with a lot of countries, helping them on testing, just like we did on the ventilators. I directed our Medicare program to make it easier for seniors to get the testing that they need, and the pharmacies, as you know, we are allowing pharmacies now to do testing, and we have other testing locations that we're going to be allowing also, but having pharmacies get involved in testing is a very big deal. We're also asking governors to do the same in their Medicaid programs, so they're going to be able and authorized to do the same in Medicaid. So that's a big deal. So we're deploying the full power and strength of the federal government to help states, cities, to help local government get this horrible plague over with, and over with fast. There's tremendous energy in our country right now. There's energy like people haven't seen in a long time, a spirit that they have not seen, and we're doing very well, considering what happened to us and considering if you look at what happened to others. This is something that the world has not seen for a long, long time. You can probably go back to 1917, where it was a terrible period of time. You all know what happened in 1917. That's over 100 years ago. With that, I'd like to introduce, if I might, Dr. Birx, if you could come up, and then Admiral, you'll come up, and between the two of you, you'll explain the entire process and how much progress we've made and where we're going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the blueprint lays out the roles and responsibilities to enhance our partnership between the private sector and the public sector, bringing together state and local governments with the federal government to ensure that we can accomplish and achieve our core principles and objectives. We can have the first slide. The core elements of the testing plan include both three elements: robust diagnostic testing plans developed in partnerships with state, and I just really want to thank the governors and the health officials, both at the state and local levels, who've been working with us day and night to work through these issues, and also all the laboratory directors in many of the states, as well as the American Society for Microbiology, who've been working with us to ensure that the plans were efficient and effective. Within the robust diagnostic testing plans, it was really unlocking the full capacity of the state, increasing the number of testing platforms. We now have multiple tests. It was really unlocking the full capacity of the state, increasing the number of testing platforms. We now have multiple tests for different platforms, increasing the ability to collect samples, increasing testing and laboratory supplies, and ensuring that we work together to make sure that every client receives the tests that they need. This is added with timely monitoring systems. And what do I mean by that? It's systems where we bring together the ability to not only diagnose the symptomatic, but proactively and interactively work with individuals that we know are at higher risk. We've worked with states to look at where the outbreaks have occurred when they're not in the large metros, and we see that it occurs very often in places of closed settings among our Native Americans and among our long-term care facilities. So an active monitoring program that's active, integrated, and innovative. And then combining us with the third element, which is the rapid response program, relying on CDC to be working with state and local governments to ensure that every symptomatic case, and critically the asymptomatic cases, are quickly tracked and traced to ensure that we can not only control this epidemic but predict outbreaks before they expand. And then finally, the plan includes an approach of using science and technology to develop even newer platforms, more efficient testing, really ensuring that the antibody tests that are utilized and recommended by both FDA and CDC have high quality in predicting both exposure to the virus and antibody development. And then finally, working on innovative tests that could be high throughput and point of care, an antigen-based test, or a point of care expanded nucleic acid test. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Ambassador Birx. If I could have the next slide, please. I want to spend just a couple minutes about going over where we've been, but more importantly, where we're going. I think we all can understand how we can group this into three distinct phases. First is our launch phase, when we were really engaging the emerging epidemic and the types of things we need to do. For example, mobilize the private sector to develop, test, and have EUAs. And I think you know over the past 2 months, the FDA has issued 67 emergency use authorizations, which is far outpacing anything that has been done or could ever been imagined. Galvanizing the research community and the commercial labs. The reason why we're here with ACLA Labs having done about 3 million tests is because of that day when it was galvanized by the President and the Vice President. We also set models in the community, those first community-based testing sites that were federally supported and really under the direction of the U.S. Public Health Service, people who had been in Japan testing people on the Diamond Princess to assure that it would be done right and it would be done safely for everyone involved. Then we moved to really scaling. That phase was very, very important because we knew we needed to be at an immense scale to enter the third phase about supporting opening again. This again, for example, a lot of my life is about swabs. It was enhancing the production capability of a small company in Maine called Puritan that you'll hear a whole lot more about, that is sort of the swab provider for the country, but also because of the FDA actions and the actions of scientific community being able to broaden the types to spun polyester. So U.S. Cotton can now come in and start delivering within the next couple of weeks 3 million swabs per week of a different type. It also did things like expanding the community-based testing sites. Whereas we started small with the commercial partners, you see today, right now, we have 73 of this 2.0 sites going to 110. And very importantly, this demonstrated the model. And 68% of those sites are in communities of moderate or high social vulnerability, and 22% are in the highest social vulnerability communities, so that we can make sure that the testing gets where it needs to be. You've just heard that that could be expanded to thousands of sites. And finally, stage 3, which is very exciting, coordinating with governors to support testing plans and rapid response programs. Over the past week, a multidisciplinary team from the White House, HHS, FDA, FEMA, has met virtually with multidisciplinary teams from every state, Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia, to understand what their testing aspirations are and to make sure that we can meet those demands. We're going to have another round of those calls this week, but as we talked about earlier today, we will be able to supply every state with the supplies and the tests that they need that will dramatically increase the number of tests we've done to this point. And just to give you an idea, the supplies that we will be providing to states, the minimum that we're supplying to states is approximately double in that month than the Republic of Korea has performed in the 4 months to now accumulated, to give you an idea of the amount of testing that we're going to be doing. So I'm very excited right now as we complete this ecosystem with the large reference labs, the LabCorp and Quest providing the very high throughput, large-scale testing, the galvanizing of the hospitals and academic labs that Dr. Birx has done by a machine-to-machine understanding and promoting that with the governors, and of course using point-of-care testing when and where that's very important to stop outbreaks or in remote areas like in the Indian Health Service or in Alaska. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Great job. Okay, so with that, we're here to answer some questions. And Mike is up here also, so we'll answer. Steve, please go ahead.
Grapple with when and how to open their states. What's the best advice from you on what they should do? How quickly?
Well, we want them to do it. We recommend that they do it as quickly as possible, but safely. We want everyone to be safe. And I think you're seeing that. You're seeing a lot of governors get out and they want to open it up. Many are thinking about their school system. Not a long way to go in the school system right now for this season, for this year. But I think you'll see a lot of schools open up, even if it's for a very short period of time. I think it would be a good thing because as you see in terms of what this vicious virus goes after, young people seem to do very well. Young people seem to do very well. So I know that there are some governors that aren't necessarily ready to open up their states, but they may be ready to open up their school systems. We'll see. But that's their choice. But the word is safety. Okay? Rapid, but safety. Yeah, please. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for you regarding one of the members of your coronavirus task force, and that's Secretary of HHS, Alex Azar.
Yeah.
On January the 28th, he was in the briefing room. And in the briefing room, he told reporters that for the individual American, the virus should not be an impact on their day-to-day life. 3 months later, more than 55,000 of our fellow Americans have now lost their lives. Mr. President, why is he still your top health advisor? Why is he still serving as the HHS secretary?
Well, I think it's a very unfair question because you have many great professionals. Some of them you have great respect for. And you have many people in the other party. You mentioned Alex Azar, but you have many people in the other party that have said the same thing and with even more confidence. So a lot of people didn't get that right. I was very fortunate, whether it was through luck or whatever, that we closed the border, we put a ban on China other than our citizens coming in. We had our citizens. You can't keep out American citizens. You know, gee, you can't come back into your country. That's a little tough to do. But we put a ban on China. That was very fortunate. But I could tell you that Nancy Pelosi was dancing in the streets in Chinatown. She wanted to go, let's go out and party. Now, that was late into February, so you don't mention that, but you could mention that. Go ahead. Any other? Please, go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. President, he has not been in a briefing.
Yeah, please stand up.
Since April the 3rd. Does that show confidence?
You should have no complaints. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, you retweeted someone who alleged that Democrats have quoted, quote, inflated the mortality rate of the coronavirus by underreporting the infection rate. Do you believe that's true, that there's some sort of conspiracy theory regarding the number of infections states are reporting?
Well, I can only say what we're doing. We're reporting very accurately. If you look at other countries are not. I mean, you can look at China, you can look at numerous countries where I don't think those are right numbers. I can only say what we're doing. It's very important to us to do very accurate reporting, and that's what we're doing. John, go ahead, please.
By retweeting that, Mr. President?
Thank you. Please.
Mr. President, I wanted to ask you about the payment protection plan, the PPP plan to help small businesses.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of concerns today with the website just not working. In fact, we heard from the American Bankers Association saying that they are deeply frustrated and that until it's fixed, American banks will not be able to help struggling small businesses. Do you know?
Well, I just came out and I hadn't heard. I heard there was a glitch. We'll find out whether or not that's so. Certainly, it did work out very well for the original amount of money. This is the second amount, and I'll find out about that. We're relying on the banks to go out and do an accurate job. Yeah, please, in the back.
All the companies that get aid, Mr. President.
Well, I wouldn't mind doing that. I don't know what the legal status of something like that. I would like to do that, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not involved in that process, but I would certainly like to have it listed. I'd have to find out if there's a legal problem, but if there isn't, I would do it gladly. Please.
Mr. President, Charlie Spearing from Breitbart News. And a majority of polls show that Americans blame China for the spread of the coronavirus, and yet they're taking advantage of the crisis to make the world more dependent on their supply chains. How do you hold China accountable, and how do you keep our country?
Well, Charlie, there are a lot of ways you can hold them accountable. We're doing very serious investigations, as you probably know, and we are not happy with China. We are not happy with that whole situation, because we believe it could have been stopped at the source. It could have been stopped quickly, and it wouldn't have spread all over the world. And we think that should have happened. So we'll let you know at the appropriate time, but we are doing serious investigations.
American businesses from relying on China for their supply chains. How do you fix that?
Well, we've already discussed that, and especially having to do with medical supplies and others. If you look prior to this virus, the deficit was coming way down under my administration because I put massive tariffs on China. We took in tens of billions of dollars, gave some of it to the farmers who were unfairly targeted by China. Nobody's ever done that before. We never took in 10 cents from China. Now, all of a sudden, I think you know very well, we've taken in tens of billions of dollars. I helped the farmers by giving them 2 years ago $12 billion, all coming from China. And we had plenty left over, too. And then the following year, $16 billion. And this year, we're also going to help our farmers. But nobody's ever done a thing like that because they were targeted unfairly by China. So we're doing a very strong investigation, and we'll let you know what the result of that is. We should be able to get the answers to.
Mr. President,
go ahead, please.
As you talk about potentially reopening up America again, as we see in the slides behind you, what data are you going to look at in the future to see if restrictions need to be reimposed?
Yeah, we're looking very much and reliant very much on the local areas, the governors. And that's been the way it has been for me, maybe not for everybody, but for me, that's the way it's been at the beginning. And from the beginning, the governors, some of them are doing an extraordinary job. Not all of them, but some of them. And I think all of them maybe have a chance to do that. Some will be a little bit different. The areas are much different. Manhattan is much different than Montana. You have a lot of different circumstances. And obviously, if you look at the virus, it hit some areas, hasn't hit very much other areas, not even at all, almost not at all. But the entire country has been infected. West Virginia is an example. I spoke to Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, and they were long before anything hit, and they had numerous deaths, even in West Virginia, and they were really the last one to be hit. So we're dealing with the governors. We had a really great call today, as I told you. Very, very solid. These were not complaining people. These were people that they had everything they needed. They had their ventilators. They have their testing. They see their testing is growing. They're growing their testing. We're helping them. We're getting them what they need. And that was a group I'm sure some of you are on the line, even though you weren't supposed to be. And I think you know what the result of that call was. Please go ahead.
Supply chain, sir.
Following up on Charlie's question on making China, holding them responsible, Germany sent a bill to China for $130 billion, €130 billion for the damages caused by the coronavirus. Would your administration look at doing the same?
Well, we could do something much easier than that. We have ways of doing things a lot easier than that. But Germany's looking at things, and we're looking at things, and we're talking about a lot more money than Germany's talking about. Yeah, please go ahead.
Mr. President,
we haven't determined the final amount yet.
Thank you, Mr.
It's
President.
very substantial. If you look at the world, I mean, this is worldwide damage. This is damage to the U.S., but this is damage to the world. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney General William Barr directed federal prosecutors to watch out for state and local officials that might be violating the Constitution by some of their stay-at-home orders. What's the strategy there? Will the federal government sue local authorities?
Well, you'd have to ask Attorney General Barr, but I think he wants to see, like everybody, he wants to see people get back and wants to see people get back to work. He doesn't want people to be held up when there's no reason for doing it. In some cases, perhaps it's too strict. He wants to make sure people have their rights and they maintain their rights, very importantly. So a lot of people would agree with him, but you'd actually have to ask that question specifically from a legal standpoint to Attorney General Barr.
Federal government suing state officials?
It would depend on the state. It would depend on the circumstances of the state. I mean, some states are, perhaps a little early, and some states are a little bit late. And the Attorney General, I read that, and I saw that, and frankly, the Attorney General doesn't want to have rights taken away, because, there are some people, they're not allowed to open up a store, or they're going to lose their livelihood. And by the way, that causes death also, between all of the things that happen, and this has been a big study. The fact that people aren't allowed to have their freedom causes a tremendous amount of problems, including death. So that's what he's talking about. Please, in the back.
Maryland and other states, Governor Larry Hogan specifically said they've seen a spike in people using disinfectant after your comments last week. I know you said they were sarcastic.
I can't imagine why. I can't imagine why. Yeah.
Take any responsibility?
No, I don't. No, I can't imagine. I can't imagine that. Yeah, go ahead, please.
President, Dr. Anthony Fauci says that we need to increase testing by double it at least, and so does the Rockefeller Foundation. When are we going to be doubling testing?
It doesn't really matter what they say there, and we just left him. We just had a meeting, but because we're going to have much more than double it very soon. Now, there are big believers in testing, and then there are some governors that don't feel as strongly about it at all. You understand that. They feel much differently about it. But we're going with maximum testing because it's something we're very capable of doing. But we'll be much more than doubled. Mike, I'd like you to answer that. We're going to be much higher than doubled on testing very shortly. Mike, please. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope the American people looking on today are as proud as the President and I are of the incredible public and private partnership that you heard from today. It was 2 months ago that we had done less than 10,000 tests for the coronavirus in the United States. But because the President brought together these incredible commercial labs, brought together the best-known retailers in America, now, Mr. President, we have 5.4 million tests. And as you said earlier today, we've done more than 200,000 tests in a single day. As we met with governors today, I sense the enthusiasm among governors for the way that testing is scaling all across the country. And we assured them on the call today that we're going to continue to directly partner with them to make sure that all of the resources you heard about today continue to be expanded. But I want to ask Admiral Giroir, who is literally working day in and day out with the governors, to describe some of the numbers for exactly where we will be. We're north of 5 million tests done now. It is remarkable to think of the pace of acceleration. But Admiral, maybe you could speak about exactly when we will reach the point that some of the experts say that they think we need to be at. whether that be 300,000 tests a day or 500,000 tests a day. But what's remarkable to me as a layperson, Mr. President, is because of this partnership you've forged, we're almost there. And we'll be there very, very soon for the American people. But everyone who is as anxious to see America reopen as this president and our entire administration are should know that the three-phased approach that the president outlined 10 days ago, we believe, and I believe increasingly governors understand around America, that we have a sufficient amount of testing today for every state that qualifies to enter phase one, to begin to reopen their economies. But, Mr. President, with your permission, I'll just ask Admiral Girard to give some specific numbers about how quick, for all that we've done, how much more quickly you'll see an expansion of testing because of the partnership that you witnessed again here today.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President. The number of tests that need to be done depends on the state level. You understand that places where there's high virus circulating will need many, many more tests. Places that do not have high virus circulating may need less tests. But let's just assume Dr. Fauci was talking about a 4 million per month number, which was sort of a week ago where we are. So we will, according to the governor's plans for next month, we will easily double that 4 million number. We will have over 20 million swabs that we're going to send out. We will have over 15 million tubes of media. We have all the tests matched, machine to machine, in a focused area. We've gone state by state and understand that. And this is not even including what you just heard, the 5 million per month test by LabCorp and Quest, or the point of care test by Abbott, or all the other tests that are out there. So in May, we are going to be doing more testing in this country. And people talk about South Korea a lot. The states with the least amount of testing will double the overall cumulative number per capita that South Korea has done in 4 months, to give you that understanding.
Go ahead, John.
Sure, this sounds incredibly promising. Walgreens, CVS with a drive-through test, the diagnostics agencies. But we sat here in the Rose Garden back on March 13, and these companies were here, some other companies were here. By my count, only 69 drive-through test sites have been set up by the companies that were here. I'm wondering if you, and of course, Mr. Vice President, back in early March, you said we'd be at 4 million tests by the following week. We're just now got there in the last few days. So what have you learned about what went wrong, month and a half, or over the last month and a half or 2 months, and what's going to go right now? What lessons have you learned from the mistakes over the last, month and a half or so?
John, I appreciate the question, but it represents a misunderstanding on your part and frankly, a lot of people in the public's part about the difference between having a test versus the ability to actually process the test. I mean, the truth was, when the president tapped me to lead the White House Coronavirus Task Force 2 months ago, we saw the production of lots of test kits going into the marketplace. But as the president has said many times, what he understood early on was the old system would never be able to process the tests at the massive volume that we would need in the midst of an epidemic. And that's why the president brought together these extraordinary commercial labs that you've heard from today, literally sat them down in the Roosevelt Room and said, we need you to turn all of your energies loose on doing the kind of high-speed testing that would be necessary for us to reach the numbers we're at today. And so there was no disconnect at all. There were lots of test kits out there, Admiral, and frankly, there still are today. There are literally millions of tests that could be run in the old-style, slow laboratory that are still conducting tests today, whether it be at the CDC or at state laboratories. But what the president brought about with this public-private partnership has brought us to the point where we've done 5.4 million tests to date, and literally you just heard that by next month we could be doing as many as 2 million tests a week all across the country to give the American people confidence that we can reopen and get our economy moving again.
So when you said 4 million tests 7 weeks ago, you were just talking about tests being sent out, not actually being completed? I'm a little confused.
John, I think they're precisely correct that in my first week on this job, we were informed that HHS, I believe IDT was the vendor, Admiral Giroir, that had distributed 1 million, was distributing another 4 million, and we believe they did. But again, those were tests that, frankly, but for the president's leadership, we'd still be waiting on those tests to be done in many cases, because they were tests that were designed to be run in the old laboratory model. But early on, at the president's direction, we brought in these incredible commercial labs. We partnered with these extraordinary retailers. And now we stand here today, literally one day last week, more than 200,000 tests in a single day. About the time that we were making those comments, we'd done less than 25,000 tests in the entire country. But we've met this moment with American ingenuity, with the incredible companies that are represented here, and we couldn't be more proud.
Follow up, Mr. President.
I think it's very important to know, and this you can get from any other country, I think, if they're being honest. Not only do we have the most testing in the world by far, but we have by far the best testing. OAN, please go ahead.
Mr. President, thank you. As I'd like to switch gears and talk about General Flynn. There are reports circulating now that he may well be fully exonerated this week. If that were the case, is there any reason why you would not bring him back into the administration?
I will only say this. I think that General Flynn is a wonderful man. He had a wonderful career, and it was a disgrace what happened to General Flynn. Let's see what happens now. But what happened to General Flynn should never happen again in our country. What happened to other people should never happen again in our country. What happened to your President of the United States should never again be allowed to happen.
Mr. President.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, thank you. Today, one of your top economic advisors, Kevin Hassett, he said that the U.S. is likely to experience a 20 to 30% decline in the GDP in the second quarter, the worst since the Great Depression. Do you agree with that assessment?
I don't know, but I can tell you the third and the fourth quarter in particular are going to be, I think, spectacular. We were talking about it with the executives. I think we're going to have a phenomenal third quarter. Nobody, except one country can be held accountable for what happened. Nobody's blaming anybody here. We're looking at a group of people that should have stopped it at the source. But so what happens in second happens in second. What we are doing is, I think you're going to see a big rise in the third, but you're going to see an incredible fourth quarter, and you're going to have an incredible next year. I think you're going to have a recovery. Look, they were just telling me inside, and it's fact, I built the greatest economy with the help of 325 million people. I built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And one day, because of something that should have never been allowed to happen, we had to close our country, we had to close our economy. I built it. We had the best employment numbers and the best unemployment numbers for Hispanic American, for African American, for Asian American, for everybody. Best stock market numbers. And by the way, the stock market was up very substantially today. And people are seeing a lot of good things. A lot of very smart people investing in the stock market right now. It's at 24,000, approximately 24,000. And if you would have said, with the tragedy that this country had to endure and go through, with all of the death and the people that died and were so badly hurt by what happened, and you can only say God bless them, but if you would have said that our country would be in the position we're now, we're ready to move forward. We'll never forget loved ones. We'll never forget these great people that sacrificed for a reason of incompetence or something else other than incompetence, what happened at a point where they could have protected the whole world, not just us, the whole world. But we had the greatest economy ever in the history of our world, and I had to turn it off in order to get to a point where we are today. And now we're making a comeback, and I think we're going to have economically, from an economic standpoint, next year an unbelievable year. And I think that you're going to see a fantastic fourth quarter, and the third quarter will start to build. But the second quarter, obviously, you're going to have GDP lack of growth. I'm looking at the head of Walmart. What a job Walmart's done in going through something. I mean, they were doing yeoman's work, including getting us millions of really very, very protective outfits. And I mean, the job that Doug and Walmart did was incredible. Millions of outfits. And those are high quality. I've seen them. Those are high quality. That's what we need. So people have stepped up to the plate. I think we're going to have a really good, I think it's going to start building. I think it's going to build fast. I think it'll be a tremendous, tremendous comeback. And, you know, so I say I built the greatest economy with all of the people that helped me and all of the people in this country. We built the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and we're going to do it again. And it's not going to be that long. Okay. Yes, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, opening up the country, how long will you keep up the travel restrictions for Europe?
Well, we're looking at that, and it depends on how long it's taking Europe to heal. Italy is starting to make a comeback. I'm very happy to see that with my friend, the Prime Minister. It's tragic what went on in Italy and Spain and France and Germany, frankly, and every country over there. It's tragic. But we'll be looking at what's happening in Europe, and certainly we want to do that, and they want to do it too. They want to do it very badly. Yeah?
Do you have any update on Kim Jong-un's health? Have you gotten any update on Kim Jong-un's health? Has he responded to your letter from March?
On Kim Jong-un? I can't tell you exactly. Yes, I do have a very good idea, but I can't talk about it now. I just wish him well. I've had a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. If I weren't president, you'd be in war. You would have been in war with Korea. You would have been in war with North Korea if I wasn't president. That I can tell you. He expected that. That I can tell you. I hope he's fine. I do know how he's doing, relatively speaking. We will see. You'll probably be hearing in the not-too-distant future. All right, one or two more. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, a question about the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Your likely Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, recently suggested that you were considering changing the date of the election, that you might try something like that. That's my first question. The second question
I never even thought of changing the date of the election. Why would I do that? November 3rd. It's a good number. No, I look forward to that election, and that was just made-up propaganda, not by him, but by some of the many people that are working, writing little statements. I see all the time, statement made, you say so, statement made, per Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. He didn't make those statements, but somebody did. But they said he made it. No, let him know I'm not thinking about it at all, not at all. Okay, go ahead in the back, please.
Yeah, the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee came out with the fourth installment of its report. It concluded that Russia interfered in the 2016 elections and there was not political bias. Do you accept its conclusions?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen the report. Yeah, please, go ahead.
President, nice to see you. I think you have a good relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. But last Saturday, Senator Graham, he mentioned in the Fox News, he interviewed, he said
he didn't say anything last Saturday. Nobody knows where he is, so he obviously couldn't have said it. If you have this is breaking news.
Yes.
That Kim Jong-un made a statement on Saturday, I don't think so. Okay, go ahead. Let's do one more, please, in the back.
If an American president loses more Americans over the course of 6 weeks than died in the entirety of the Vietnam War, does he deserve to be reelected?
So, yeah, we've lost a lot of people, but if you look at what original projections were, 2.2 million, we're probably heading to 60,000, 70,000. It's far too many. One person is too many for this. And I think we've made a lot of really good decisions. The big decision was closing the border or doing the ban, people coming in from China, obviously other than American citizens, which had to come in. Can't say you can't come in, you can't come back to your country. I think we've made a lot of good decisions. I think that Mike Pence and the task force have done a fantastic job. I think that everybody working on the ventilators, you see what we've done there, have done unbelievable. The press doesn't talk about ventilators anymore. They just don't want to talk about them, and that's okay. But the reason they don't want to talk, that was a subject that nobody would get off of. They don't want to talk about them. We're in the same position on testing. We are lapping the world on testing, and the world is coming to us. As I said, they're coming to us saying, what are you doing? How do you do it? And we're helping them. So, no, I think we've done a great job. And one person, I will say this, one person is too many. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
That is President Trump wrapping up the daily briefing of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. The key here was the unveiling of a strategy to help the various states ramp up their capacity to test for COVID-19, or actually SARS-CoV-2, that is the virus that creates the disease, COVID-19. Now, the president made these remarks after meeting with executives from companies including Walgreens and Walmart, Rite Aid, CVS Health, Quest Diagnostics, LabCorp, and Thermo Fisher. The goal here is to expand testing capacity. The president saying earlier that as many as 5.4 million tests have been conducted to date. And then later in the press conference, Vice President Pence went on to say that it is possible, given this public-private partnership, to test 2 million per week by next month. I'm Doug Krisner at Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York. This is Daybreak Asia. I want to go to San Francisco now, bring in my colleague Ed Baxter, who's also been listening to the daily briefing. What jumped out at you?
Well, Doug, two things. First, optics, and then substance. And the optics, after a very rough couple of days for the White House, where they didn't have briefings over the weekend, and then started the day today by saying there was not going to be a briefing, and then coming back and saying, well, it was going to take a different form. It would not be a coronavirus briefing. And then actually, his press secretary said that Mr. Trump wanted people to know that he was still in charge. So he did hold the briefing today. But as I say, the substance, the optics, and we can get into that politically, how that plays, the substance came from Dr. Birx. There was some question about whether she was going to be there, and she was, and she laid out the program and the steps for getting back to work. And she said the first is robust testing, and they did spend a lot of time talking about testing and saying that they were going to double it, and monitoring, proactively work with higher risk people, rapid response team to make sure the symptomatic and asymptomatic cases are traced, and then said that they're going to use science and technology to make sure the antibody tests are accurate as well, and antigen tests for point of care. So that is where the plan. The president said there's a hunger to get back to work, and from my view, those were the salient points that came out of this.
I want to bring in Bloomberg reporter Jordan Fabian, who joins us on the line from Washington. Jordan, pleasure to have you on the program. Ed alluded to it, but I want you to kind of place this daily briefing in the context of the comments that we heard Friday from President Trump on the disinfectants and everything else that created a lot of flashpoints over the weekend.
Yeah, obviously this is an attempt to get back on track and focus on the message at hand, which was how is the government going to stop this pandemic and make sure the country can safely reopen. That was thrown into question, to put it lightly, after the president floated that disinfectant idea last week. And as you said, they even discussed the idea of limiting these press conferences, but the president isn't one to let go of the limelight, so he got up there to make some announcements on testing with some corporate executives that would, they say, double the testing capacity of the country. That being said, we've heard these kind of promises before. I'm thinking back to March 13th when the president, said that these companies were going to be rolling out major testing sites. And here we are. It's now April 27th, and we're hearing, now the new promises to ramp up testing, even though those old promises weren't fulfilled.
Jordan, were you surprised at all, just on that vein, that there was no question from the media? The whole atmosphere, the optics of this today seemed a little bit softer, or maybe that's the wrong term, lacking in the really harsh edges, except when the president started to talk about China. Were you surprised that nobody asked him about those things, or is that just, has he managed to make that old news now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he was asked about this on Friday. His aides were asked about it over the weekend. And so I think after 4 days, it's one of the stories that kind of, tends to die down. I mean, I was in the Oval Office with him on Friday when we asked him, like, what were we talking about? And he attempted to say that he was being sarcastic, even though that certainly wasn't how those remarks came off when he made them at the time. So the press did ask him about this. And now, the White House trying to move on from from those remarks, even though they did cause some very real confusion with people apparently calling into places in Maryland asking about, what is this about disinfectant and should we use it?
One of the things that President suggested is that, they recommended, the administration is recommending that states open quickly and safely. Dr. Birx emphasized the fact that this is essentially a blueprint for states to build on the public-private relationship or partnership. Most of the responsibility for funding and executing the testing, won't that go to the individual states?
Yeah, and that's right. That's the main message here, is that the states are responsible for their own testing regimes, and the administration is saying that its role is going to be to back them up. Essentially, if they have a problem getting some kind of supplies or testing capacity, that they'll help them out. But we saw this play out a few weeks ago in the debate over personal protective equipment, when states were really having problems getting things like N95 masks and surgical gowns for hospital workers, and there was a lot of confusion, and it ended up that the states were bidding against the federal government for some of those supplies, and it really was a chaotic system, and there were calls from governors for the federal government to take a more active role, and the federal government essentially declined, and we're seeing that happen here again, where you're hearing from healthcare experts and governors urging the federal government to take a more active role in this, to be more, proactive in making sure there's enough testing, but again, they're taking a backseat to states here and saying, hey, it's your problem.
Jordan, it struck me, and I want to bounce it off you, see if the same way. No matter what you think of Donald Trump, and that can go the whole wide range of policy, personality, character. It is pretty amazing to see the line of the private sector of CEOs walk up and form this private sector, public sector unity. It is really an amazing scene, or am I just overseeing it?
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable, but I would also mention that the president, when it comes to companies who that haven't done what he wants as far as the coronavirus response, I'm thinking back to GM with the ventilator situation and 3M with the situation with masks. The president's been very bellicose against them, even threatening to invoke the Defense Production Act to force them to do certain things. And so I think these companies have become politically savvy, and they know that showing up to the White House and making public praise in front of President Trump for his efforts on the coronavirus is going to keep him off their backs, I should say, and make sure they don't have a political problem with the White House.
Jordan, thank you so much for being with us, sharing your perspective. Bloomberg reporter Jordan Fabian there joining us from Washington here on Daybreak Asia. I want to cross to Hong Kong, bring in Brian Curtis, who's looking at market action. So late in the day here in the States, we learned that the administration was preparing to release this action plan for testing for the COVID-19 disease. And that was one of the things, I think, that was kind of fueling a lot of the positivity in equity markets today, this idea that we're going to get major economies reopening, and that's obviously contingent on the testing component, right?
Well, we had that develop really over the weekend, and we saw, the Asian markets yesterday jump as a result of that. And we had Europe was up quite significantly overnight, too. The DAX more than 3%. So I'm not sure there was anything too much new out of what we heard from the president today, although a little bit more of a systematic plan for getting the testing out there. One thing that you guys didn't mention that I think we can sort of store up as a possible negative for markets later is the president threatened large damages against China about the spread of this virus, and that was on the back of a question about what Germany is doing. And he said a serious investigation is underway. So we'll have to see whether that rears its ugly head later, particularly in terms of trade, continued trade discussions with China. Now, as we look at Asian markets this morning, it seems that they will likely move higher, as we saw in Europe and the United States. And we did see a little bit of an interesting change in the American markets today. We had a really big bounce in cyclical stocks. And that's something that had been in favor, then fell out of favor when it seemed like opening had to be extended further out. But now we had banks, energy, and industrials all really surging today. And small caps in particular, Doug, really jumped with the Russell 2000 up 4%. Tech took a break as the money rotated into some of those value areas. Microsoft, for instance, Google and Facebook all finished fractionally lower for the day. The dollar was weaker. Oil took another dive. The big ETF, USO, said it would diversify out of the June WTI contract. And right now we have WTI trading at $13.10. It had dropped down significantly lower than that earlier. Just a couple of other quick notes. Continued progress in Europe, Spain, Italy, and France. All these countries generally saw virus deaths and infections lower, and they signaled tentative moves to reopen their economies. In terms of the futures here, everything a little higher, S&P E-minis relatively flat. Doug, back to you.
You were talking about that collapse in crude oil. Advocates for the ethanol industry today asked President Trump for a little bit of support. They said that more than half of U.S. capacity to manufacture ethanol is already offline, given the cratering that we have seen in demand. We're coming up on 44 past the hour. Daybreak Asia and an update on global news. Let's take you back to San Francisco. Check in with Ed Baxter. Ed.
Yeah, okay, Doug, thank you. I wanted to do some things that kind of swirl around the outside of what we've just been covering and carrying for you. And one of those stories that caught actually both my and Brian's eye, top U.S. health official has spoken to his Taiwanese counterpart about fighting the coronavirus outbreak. Now, this, if you follow this at all, and I'm sure you do, is a rare cabinet-level contact between the governments that's certain to anger Beijing and is very, very rare. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar discussed giving Taiwan a bigger role in the global fight. So we'll continue to follow that. And during Kim Jong-un, during the White House briefing, the president said that he does know Kim Jong-un's condition, but said that he couldn't say anything about it at this point, but did say that he wishes him well. So I guess we can make what we want to of that. And the White House certainly did pivot from the president talking about science to the economy in today's briefing. Also, just very quickly, New York has canceled its June 23rd presidential primary. Andrew Cuomo says he's extending the stay-home order, eyeing a phased opening of parts of the state soon. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan on Bloomberg Business Week said her city has been very successful in virus response and worries about reopening. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom scolded some people who flocked to Southern California beaches over the weekend. He said all progress could be wiped out if people aren't careful. All right, in San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. Brian?
Well, I can take a look at a couple of stories here in the Daybreak Asia paper and Tea Leaves review. These are some of the stories that we are following as well, but they came from outside press. Dow Jones reporting that Apple is delaying the mass production of 2020 iPhones by a month. And so it's pushing back this ramp up of 4 new iPhone models by around 30 days or so, cutting the number of handsets scheduled to be launched later this year. It plans to make those available in the second half, and it's unclear whether the amount won't be manufactured in 2020, that those would then be pushed into 2021, again, according to sources of Dow Jones. And the Washington Post here is reporting on the China opening up in a sense, and as it relates to the retirement savings program for federal and military personnel in the United States. Now, that program is looking to double the number of countries represented in its investment fund. And one of the countries to be added is China. And that is a problem for some people in the United States. 8 former senior military leaders issued an open letter seeking to prevent the change. It's set to take effect in the second half of this year. The letter has rekindled a controversy that has flared several times since the Thrift Savings Plan first committed to broadening its international stock fund. So again, China once again here in the target, and we heard a little bit more from that from the president earlier this morning. All right, Paul and Doug, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I want to bring in Paul Allen, our colleague who's joining us this hour from Sydney. And Paul and I are going to take a closer look now at what happened to the crude oil space today. We had WTI in the New York session tumbling 24%. Mike McGlone is our guest. Mike is a BI commodity strategist. Mike, it's always a pleasure. So was this all really the news that came from the biggest oil ETF saying that would sell out of that June contract? Is that what left us with this huge collapse in prices today?
Hey, Doug, that appears to be part of it. But if you look at open interest in that contract as of Friday, we only have the data from the day before, it was already much lower than it typically is with 3 days left to expiration. Expiration for the June contract is May 19th, and it's only about 300,000 versus a typical about this time of year is 500,000. So everybody got it. You have to get out of that front contract. It looks like USO was just a little late to the game. Now, I don't exactly know what they were doing today, but other entities too were selling that front contract. The basic is there's so much volatility. It's just, and in the bigger picture, it's a tree in the forest. And the forest is there's just way too much supply, no demand, and you're not going to get support from the Fed like you do in the stock market.
Is this a case of the oil price reacting vigorously to any external stimulus at all?
Well, the external stimulus, it might be nice to see that, but what oil needs is less supply and more demand. And one problem was this was really the trend before that COVID really hit and caused the lockdown. Now we got to some extreme levels. I think what we saw last week, that negative 38 price in WTI will mark the all-time low. But we might see near there again as people just liquidate positions. And a lot of the people who track the futures are learning the lesson that you probably have to be very careful being in that front contract near expiration. Now, we still have 3 weeks. But again, there's no place to put it. And so they usually have to sell, and the market just catching up to that.
What do we know about the amount of time at the current rate of refining, the amount of time that may have to go by to elapse before inventory levels come down to, I don't even want to say near normal, but obviously for the glut to be reduced in a meaningful way?
That right now, Doug, is the dream. I just don't know where that's going to happen at the moment because, first of all, you need the demand to come back. And using China as an example, it's just not coming back. So we got to get that supply off the market from demand. That's not happening. We heard what's happening in ethanol looking for help. That's a big problem. So I just don't see it I don't see it on the horizon, and that's the problem in the market. We just cannot see where it's going to get better. And we all know it's hard to reduce production, and then it's hard to bring it back on. But this is the perfect storm.
Yeah, let's talk about the production side of things, because as storage capacity maxes out, demand is missing in action. We've seen Saudi say, well, it's going to hit its production cut targets early, but is that going to be enough? Are we just all standing by waiting for more word of cuts from OPEC+?
That's what we are. We have to hear more of that because let's look at least for the short term, demand has reduced so much, in some cases up to 50%, and supply is still going. So we're not hearing supply cuts of 50%. Now, storage is full, and we're also hearing about all the seaborne, all the ships are full. So it's maybe we have another 2 weeks where people still have a little room to put places in storage and find some old storage and bring on new storage. But at the moment, it's low prices that are reducing the supply, and this is what has to happen. We just have to take the supply off the market. It's still not, we don't see enough production reductions.
Mike, you alluded to the problems in the ethanol industry. Advocates for the industry today, I was talking about this earlier, asked the president for aid. They said that more than half U.S. ethanol capacity, production capacity, is already offline, given everything that we're describing in terms of the cratering in demand. What's the knock-on effect in some of the other markets, whether it's corn that's used for ethanol production? What are we seeing in some of the soft commodities that are used to produce ethanol?
Well, and glad you brought that up. It's down, unfortunately. I'll be publishing my agriculture outlook tomorrow. And one thing about agriculture, corn, soybeans, and sugar use more biofuel than ever, are used for more biofuel than ever. And when you see ethanol at the all-time low in futures, it's likely the corn's going to break through support, $3 key support. Soybeans have good support, about $8. It's just likely to take that lower. So we're going to see more hurting for U.S. farmers. They're already in a bad way. And I just don't see an upside yet until we see the demand come back. And so the knockoff effect is very negative.
I want to talk a little bit more about storage as well, but you've already mentioned it to a degree. But Goldman's saying global storage capacity is going to be reached in 3 weeks. There are numerous, apparently, I believe, up to 60 oil tankers floating off Singapore, all full. Logistically, what it can be done with this glut of oil? Where can we put it?
Exactly. I don't have an answer to that one, Brian. It's just no place. They have to stop the supply, and that means we have to cut off supply from Saudi Arabia, U.S. shale. There's going to be bankruptcies. I'm just sorry to say, but it just has to be cut off. And there's no place to put it. I mean, there's just no other tankers. I've ever heard about the small boats in Rotterdam and stuff being used. There's just no place else to put it.
We were talking earlier, Mike, about the ETF, the big ETF USO that is basically liquidating its June WTI contract, getting out. You traded for many years in Chicago. You know some of the players in this space, those that trade in New York in crude oil futures. Let's talk a little bit about the industry, the firms that are responsible for trading these contracts. Do you think we could see some pain in those areas?
The ideal thing for firms that trade the contracts is volume and volatility, and they're getting that. They're getting a lot of trading. For instance, CME, they're making money in commissions. The FCMs are making commissions, but it's the entities responsible, like the USO, the people managing the ETFs. Now, they're the ones really having a problem. They might go under. But when you're a broker and you see volatility like this is an ideal environment as long as you don't have too many errors. That was always a big problem with volatility, is when you're the ones executing. But the executing, the CMEs, the FCMs, the future commission merchants, the brokers, they should be doing very well in this environment.
You mentioned a minute ago the risk of bankruptcies, the likelihood that we're going to see some. In that context, can you give us the temperature of the U.S. shale industry?
I think it's classic beginning of a pretty severe bust. The question is how long it lasts. It's probably going to be as bad as it started in 86, and we had that little one for a while initially in Northern Dakotas in 2015-16. But this is going to be probably as bad as it gets. And I mean, they're going to be government assistance, but there's just no place to put this. You just look at U.S. liquid fuel demand; it's plunge. We've never seen it plunge like this. And the problem I have is there's so much optimism for the V bottom and recovery, and I think a lot of these people working from home are less likely to get back on the road. And if we look at the last time we had a similar plunge, which was 2008 and 9, it took a real long time to get demand back up where it was. And again, we have a lot of things like electric cars and thrifting and efficiency. We just don't use as much of it as we do anymore. So this is a big hit for the whole energy industry.
One of the things we talk a lot about when it comes to the refining side is the capacity utilization rate. What do we know about that, the major refiners, whether they're in Houston or other parts of the country that really refine much of the oil and distillates that are consumed here in the United States?
Yeah, not much I can offer there. I guess the refiners might do okay because their source is very cheap, so as long as they didn't lock up too many prices, they should be fine. But I just don't follow as much. For me, it's usually more the actual supply of the crude oil versus refining into the distillates and unleaded gas.
Do the big majors, are they the beneficiaries in all this? You talk about some of the shale producers and the risk of perhaps insolvency, but I'm wondering whether or not there are bigger fish that maybe benefit from the current dynamic in the market, or not so much.
The only major beneficiary I see, Doug, are the consumers. Those who've been, used to paying an average unleaded gas price of over $2 a gallon. I'm probably going to get it closer to $1. And maybe 1.5. The consumer is the only beneficiary, really. So the primary beneficiary. So now there's going to be more the granular side, but I'm just writing out my ag comment tomorrow, and I feel so bad for the farmers. I hate being bearish, but the trickle down effect for like ags. But anyone, of course, it's going to cost them less for their trucks and diesel and stuff. But no, they're the only consumers, and the consumers obviously with 20% unemployment, it's not going to make much difference.
Yeah, what a deflationary kind of influence here, huh? Thanks, Mike. Always a pleasure to benefit from your perspective. Mike McGlone there, he is a Bloomberg intelligence commodity strategist looking at what happened today in crude oil. The June futures contract in New York was down 24%. We settled at $12.78. Right now we're trading $12.80 in the electronic session. We're about an hour away from market action in Tokyo, Sydney, and Seoul. Mixed picture for the futures. We'll talk more about what happened today in the U.S. and kind of